Go ahead.
Chokma, my name is Izzy Mondragon. I am a mixed media painter and printmaker from Ventura, California, currently studying to complete my Bachelor's of Fine Arts at IAIA, and my artwork explores processes of healing historical trauma through reflection as a Chickasaw, Purepecha, and Chicanx artist. I have the pleasure today to introduce Maeve Leslie, Heather Parrish, and Andi Newberry for their panel speaking on their artistic processes with printmaking. Maeve Leslie is a multimedia artist whose research revolves around unseen labor in the United States. Their artwork expresses the concepts of identity, erasure, social justice, and diaspora primarily through printmaking, hand paper making, and book arts. The importance of material exploration is emphasized in their work through learning and incorporating other mediums when necessary. She received her BFA at the University of Denver in 2015 and her MFA in Studio Arts at the University of Wisconsin-Madison in 2021. Would you
Um,
like me to introduce everybody at once?
no, that's good. You can do one at a time.
Okay.
Cool. Well, thank you for the introduction. We will see if we can get through this presentation without my cat making an appearance or my dog letting himself be known. Um, and then let's see. I will share my screen. All right. So yeah, my name is Maeve Leslie. I am currently located in Denver, Colorado. I am the full-time printmaking faculty member at MSU Denver Metropolitan State University of Denver. Um, and I have just put together some slides for y'all, specifically about installation. So the way that I like to, I guess, show my work, especially to my students, is I like to show them just how my work has evolved. I think it's really important and really nice to remind us that I didn't just wake up one day and my work is where it is now. It really took me a lot of trial and error, to get there. And so I'm using this first installation, um, or this first, I don't know if I'd call it an installation, but I feel like it's like my first foray into installation and what that means to make installation work. And this piece is called Pero Nasaan Am I? Or it's like, but where am I? Fun fact for y'all is that Tagalog is not a directly translatable language. A lot of Tagalog is, I guess, I don't know the correct dialectical term, but it's more like feeling. So the best example I have is the word maganda. It can mean like my food is tasty or this is pretty or like wow, look at the land, it's like it's generally positive. And so a lot of my artwork began to explore, how do you translate something that's technically not translatable, especially as it relates to a person of multi-ethnicities and the child of an immigrant. And so these books that I made, each one has a different title. One is called Bridges, the other is called Boundaries, and the other is called Home. And then kind of separating bridges and boundaries from home is a CMYK screen print of my mother and I the first time we went to the Philippines together. And so the Bridges book has letterpressed imagery of bridges, Boundaries has letterpressed imagery of fences, and then the book Home is blank. And so you can see some detail images here. The CMYK print, I took pieces of vellum and put each layer of the CMYK process on its own vellum. I wanted to keep them separate to like, oop, there he goes. Sorry. Um, Okay. But I did this to talk about like code switching and the literal like color separation or separation that I feel like occurs in me depending on the environment I'm in. And this was also a response to moving from Colorado to Wisconsin. And I noticed when I was in Wisconsin, more folks had questions about my identity than had ever been brought up before. Like I had actual people on the bus asking me like where I was from, or they'd be like, "Oh, in the United States, this is how we do this." And I was like, "Sir, I was born in Pennsylvania. I don't know what we're assuming here." So this is where a lot of this started for me, and this exploration of, I guess, taking up space more or less. Um, so I took my first paper making class at UW-Madison and instantly fell in love with it. But I didn't know what to do with this yet. So I started, honestly, like I started just screen printing on paper just to see what would happen. And then I started just putting the paper on the walls to see what would happen. And I wasn't super satisfied with that. Um, like I really was struggling with what can this look like? What can happen here? And these are pieces of handmade paper. The top left is 100% American cotton fiber that I sourced, and then the top right is a Filipino abaca and oh, I forget the other material, but it was all materials sourced from the Philippines. And then the bottom paper is just a combination, like about a 50-50 combination of the two. And I called this a family portrait. And so I was really kind of exploring these facets of identity, and I'm like, what can I do when my work is really minimal, not quite minimalist? But what happens when we really scale it down to make it about the material itself? Which led me to my MA thesis qualifier show. So I ended up making this paper installation. I believe it's about 45 feet long by 12 or 15. I forget. It wraps around the gallery. But it's a quite large installation. And I was playing around with screen printing different inks that had different light reactivity to them. So when you were a certain distance from the installation, certain pieces of paper would be illuminated, like the imagery on them would be visible. And then when you would get closer, those would fade away and new imagery would be visible. And I was just very interested in depicting like the land in a different way for this. And really questioning, I guess, like identity, the land, like, where is home? Is home, like, is home tied to a land? Is home tied to a people? And really considering that. I also decided on this format because I was very inspired by an artist talk in grad school. And this artist, I remember she was like, I drive a Toyota Prius and my artwork has to fit in that Prius or I'm not making it. And I was like, that is such a brilliant parameter. And it actually was very liberating to set specific parameters around my artwork and how it fits and packs down and how I store it and live with it. And so I decided on this piece that packs down into a very small portfolio. But when I install it, it becomes a large piece. Just a little background. After I made that artwork, I was able to receive funding to take a trip to the Philippines to learn more about specific fibers. And I became very interested in pineapple fiber or piña, which is typically used to create garments that serve special purposes, typically around like church purposes. So think like baptisms, funerals, weddings, and things like that. But Filipino folks in diaspora often recontextualize these garments to mean other things or to just be broadly used for celebrations. And that's just like very umbrella, watered down terminology for what the pineapple fiber does and what the barong, which is the garment that's typically made, the purpose it serves. But I thought it was really fascinating to see this material. Like the leaves grow very long, and then you remove, think of like the leaves as like your arm, and you're removing the muscle to get to the veins. And so these like veins of the plant are very long, very hair-like. They're about 3 feet long per strand. And so I wanted to really explore how is this process? How is this made? What do we do with it? So I worked with some local farmers and artisans who know how to properly clean this fiber. and then they spin it into thread. These are some samples of patterns you can get on your barong if you're ordering like wholesale for like a wedding party or something like that. I thought it was really fascinating that these folks were weaving on these looms that they made from, these metal pieces. And it just never occurred to me that, you can just kind of make a loom like that. But it was just a very interesting contradiction of these heavy metal pieces weaving these very fine fibers. And then this is just a photograph I took with a barong. I want to show mainly the translucency here. Like it's a very light fabric. There's a lot of mixed research that I'm learning about more recently on kind of the purpose of the decorative embroidery and the purpose of the garment altogether. But when I was researching, I was told that the garment was transparent and thin like this so that folks indigenous to the Philippines could work outside without sweating, but were able to keep mosquitoes and other insects off their skin. But it was transparent so that you could see their tribal tattoos and affiliations. We will see. Oh, okay. Well, this is a video. It's not working, unfortunately, but I wanted to show how the fibers scraped, excuse me, and cleaned because it's kind of fun to see. I met a local salesperson in the area that my mother's from, and she invited me in to learn more about this process. So, the folks that clean the fiber meet her in town, and she weighs and inspects the fibers that are cleaned and pays them for their work. And then the factory or the weaving factory that I showed a couple slides ago, that's actually her weaving space. So then she takes the fibers there, and then the folks that work there begin to weave it into cloth. So here's more of this being dried. And you can see it really looks like hair. Like it's very tough material to make paper with. I don't know if any of y'all have made paper before, but this stuff was very difficult. I actually injured both my arms just trying to beat it so many times to get it to a good consistency. Oh, is this my video? There we go. I'll mute it because it's very loud. But you can see that they're using a piece of china plate to scrape away the outer parts of this leaf. And they just do it all by hand. And you just scrape away layer by layer. So this is what I'm trying to articulate by if the leaf is an arm, you're kind of scraping away the meat to get to the veins because the part of the plant that we use is actually what distributes water throughout the leaf of the plant. And I can speed it up a little bit. And so you're just yeah, just removing all of this
Can we
material.
just hear the,
Oh, sorry.
can we just hear this? Can we just hear the sound for a little bit?
Oh, sure.
I don't know if the sound will work if you didn't select to have the sound.
Oh,
That's why.
okay. So sorry. Um, but you can see how they're pulling the fibers out from the plant. And so what that led me to is this installation, which was my thesis show. And so I'm recontextualizing the barong into my own context. It's very layered and very nuanced. Or like thinking of the basics of a barong, right? And relating that to like a blue collar button down shirt. And so I made this work at the time that Asian hate was on an uprise due to, I guess, like anti-Asian COVID related sentiments that were being passed around. And this was my response to that. I think I started actually making the work shortly after the salon shooting in Georgia that targeted Asian women specifically. And I was really interested in these moments of erasure, specifically related to my culture and the impacts of Filipinos in the United States. And I was researching one of the laws that was passed after World War II, where Filipinos could come to the United States in an expedited process as long as they were nurses. And so there are many times that the US has imported labor for various reasons, but I was very fixated on this because my mother's a Filipino nurse, and I was also researching the like farmers' strikes and movements and how oftentimes Filipino folks were grouped in with folks that were from Mexico and looking at that as a moment of erasure despite Filipinos really spearheading farm workers' rights movements. And so I have these shirts that I worked with a team that I was able to fund through a grant to help me sew these pieces because my skills were not quite there yet. And we made these shirts. They're all handmade papers. Most of the papers I made, and then I screen printed them myself, and I'll show some images of that later. I also made these neon stars, which are a culturally significant item, or not item, but culturally significant symbol in my culture as well. And then I made this neon sign to resemble like an open sign that we would typically see in like restaurants, salons, very classic. And this was just my own riff on that with using the Filipino like colors of the flag and symbol or elements from the flag as well. And I'll do a little walk through of the space here. Oh, actually, this is one of the shirts that I made, and this is what I was trying to describe earlier with the light reactive inks. So when the spotlight is on the shirt directly, the image fades, but then when the viewer stood between the light and the shirt, the print was visible. And these are some details of the shirt. And you can kind of see some of these light reactive inks. I also have these details in here because some of these are papers from my MA show. And so this is a big thing in my practice is to try and reuse what I have instead of making new work. There's kind of this like evolution through line through the work. Like it evolves as, I evolve, it evolves as politics evolve, and so on and so forth. And so I have this practice of making things, cutting them apart, and repurposing them. So then you'll see some more of that in some later slides. But here are just some images of how I created the um, or printed the paper to make my own like paper yardage that I cut apart to make those paper shirts. Instead of an artist statement, I made a zine for folks to take home with them. And then this was an installation I made afterwards. So I started working on these stars, which I had mentioned in the previous artwork, which are called parole. And essentially, parole is a decoration that you see around Christmas time. It's meant to reference the Star of Bethlehem in the Philippines, and these things go up from like September to January every year. In the Philippines, Christmas is celebrated for many months. However, whenever I see these stars specifically outside of the Philippines, they're kind of like to me, they serve as beacons towards other Filipinos in diaspora. And so I started playing with, what happens when I make a huge installation of these and what context does it get to be seen in, depending on where the installation exists. And so this was the first iteration in Madison, Wisconsin that I made these. And you can see I'm cutting up that fabric from my shirts and putting them here. And some of or fabric, excuse me, the paper from my shirts and putting them here. And then I'm also cutting up previous papers from previous installations. I'm also looking at transforming these stars into little books where I do cut up the previous work and put them into book form as well. And then most recently in September of last year, I was invited to show in Minneapolis, in this really unique space here, which was a lot of fun to like troubleshoot from a distance and figure out how do I articulate to someone the way that I want an installation to be seen and go up. And it was a very unique space. Like it's very tall and narrow. And I'll show you some more images of that. Um, the title, which translates to the chicken you don't see, you cannot eat. I'm looking at a Filipino proverb and using that to express, I guess, the politics currently. I was invited to do this show right around the time or right before ICE raids were really getting, how do I want to phrase this? Before the murders that occurred in Minneapolis happened, right? And then there was an uptick in ICE and a lot of fear around what would happen with ICE patrols. And so I was kind of talking about, you know, is it better serving for us to feel erased right now in a form of protection, or is this the time to be seen? And that's what I was really investigating and navigating in this iteration of my work. And so it's really a lovely space. Like it's very intimate. You have to walk through this doorway. And then I have the photograph of my mom here, or my mom and I here, that you really have to try and work to see, along with the shirts and then the stars. And that is all I have for you all today. I don't know the format if we're going to do questions now or all at the end, but feel free to drop them in the chat too if you're worried about forgetting them. But thank you.
We'll do all the questions at the end.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed it very much and I love your work. Now going on to Heather Parrish. Heather Parrish uses printmaking, experimental photography, and installation with video projection to explore notions of perception and belonging across fluid boundaries. Her heightened sensitivity to self and surrounding arises from her culturally nomadic childhood growing up as a white American in Indonesia and Malaysia. She focuses on the boundary between interior and exterior as a porous and dynamic site of complex negotiations. Collaboration is a sustaining part of her practice, including work with scientists, filmmakers, poets, and activists. Parrish received an MFA in printmaking from the University of Notre Dame and a BA in kinesiology from the University of Texas at Austin. She worked as a professional collaborating printer at the Flatbread Press in Austin, Texas, and has exhibited work in the United States and internationally. She is currently an associate professor for printmaking at the University of Iowa in Iowa City, Iowa.
Yeah, thank you for that introduction. I'm going to share my screen, and I think my screen. Ah, there it is. Sorry. The window that I have my talk on is missing somewhere between my two screens.
It's happened to a lot of us, Heather. Hang in there.
I'm gonna get this. Don't worry. We got it.
I have no doubt.
We're with you.
Thank you. Okay. I'm just gonna pull it up in a new spot. Get everything to fit here. I'm sure this happens to a lot of people, but you know, we tried this out right before
No,
start, and
it's
everything
totally
was
fine.
perfect,
It's
and
totally
then
fine.
like things disappear.
I said this earlier. I think that you weren't quite on yet, but it's like it's beautiful that we can connect so quickly, but then it's always something.
Always something. Oh gosh, I might have just done it again. It's like when I
Those of us who went this morning, I had to leave the room and come back.
True.
oh,
True.
I hope that's
If you want to, like, we can potentially
Does
have.
this,
Oh,
let's see. Can you see, does it have my slideshow on it here?
it says
No.
double click to enter full screen mode, but that's all it says.
Okay. I think what's going on is I'm trying to pull that up while Zoom is, I don't know. The Zoom and the presentation don't want to share space, so okay. I'm gonna go a different route. Slideshow. Zoom. You just have to deal with me looking up. Share. Here. Is that looking better?
We
Perfect.
can see something. Yeah.
It says currents.
Yes.
I
Thank
got
you
really
Yes.
creative with my name for my presentation
That's
and
great.
borrowed your title for the symposium, which I was quite inspired by. I'm just gonna start my timer here so I have an idea. Okay, so yeah, so thank you so much for inviting me here. So I'll be responding to the theme of the symposium currents, and the question of engaging in creative holistic resistance, which I really think about in the context of relationship. So I'm going to be sharing 3 really different projects, but I hope you'll see the various threads and the way that this plays out in my work. So first, a very brief introduction of myself. I'm from Austin, Texas, many generations deep. More importantly, and even deeper, this is the ancestral homelands of the Plain tribes, including Lipan Apache, Comanche, and Tonkawa tribes. I also grew up in Indonesia from age 6 to 16. So while the details of this story are for another time, the information is important in that my hybrid upbringing shapes my perspective and my artwork. Like many of you, I'm sure I'm one of those both ands, neither nor, and dare I say non-binary, at least culturally. And I know, Maeve, you can relate. So today I'm going to talk about these 3 projects, homing, seeing out the other eye, and the meandering river. While these are very different, they each center water in various ways. And to borrow the word of the scholar Dr. Jennifer Roberts, I work with the maneuvers of printmaking, while my work extends far beyond traditional printmaking. I think like a printmaker in layers, impressions, reversals, and contact. So homing is an ongoing series of installations. They're loose meditations on embodied consciousness and the porous boundary between self and other. I'll start by bringing in quantum physicist and feminist theorist Karen Barad. In the words of artist James Bridle, Barad describes a universe comprised of phenomena which emerge not from bodies themselves, but from what she calls their intra-actions. Intra-action is a particularly Baradian term and is firmly grounded in quantum theory. Interaction is not interaction where 2 phenomena or bodies already in existence act on one another. Rather, it is the process of becoming phenomenon and becoming bodies, which takes place when the 2 touch one another. For Barad, the entire universe is a continual process of emergence, in which nothing is certain or fixed, but is always becoming itself through its intra-action with everything else. I regard the boundary as a place of intra-action, rather than firm and fixed, separating inside from outside. It is a place of encounter or entanglement, the both and neither nor. A conduit of intra-action where interior and exterior touch and create one another. The term homing evokes navigation and return and the emotional weight of belonging. It is a continual process of negotiation, enfolded in and enfolding memory and time. Ultimately, this is about relationality, always ever encountering, entangled, emergent. I'm going to try another tricky maneuver here. Ooh, look, that worked. So this is just a brief video to show you how the video projections work within the space of the installations. Most of my installations have some permutation of this water video, but I'll just be showing you a series of stills after this video. And this work is called Cradle. So these, I'm just going to continue scrolling through. Show you some behind the scenes shots as well. This is a mock-up that I made, and also importantly for this piece, I filmed the trajectory of light over the course of the day on this small model within my studio. And then in the installation space, I projected that arc of time within the large installation. So it functions sort of like a memory of light and connection with the outside. This is the cradle piece, but installed in the window of a museum. Oops. So within these spaces, the suspended screens respond to other bodies in the space, offering a breathy rustle of acknowledgement when someone enters and moves through. This complicates the sensation of viewer and viewed when we regard one another in these spaces. Oops, these are some detail view. I originally named it Time Space Shadow and realized a couple years later that its real name is Mother Water. Sorry. So moving on to the next project, Seeing Out the Other Eye. This is a research-based project, so bear with me for a moment while I go through the research, and then I'll show you more of the images. So Waller Creek runs along the eastern edge of the heart of downtown Austin, Texas. This humble yet unruly waterway bears the name of the city's first urban planner and is inscribed with its legacies of division and displacement. Since Austin's initial urban grid overlaid the creek's natural floodplain, the two have had a troubled relationship. Austin's marginalized residents have repeatedly borne the brunt. The abbreviated history goes like this. After the Civil War, newly freed people of color settling in Austin were relegated to reside in the vulnerable, flood-prone terrain and the creek banks, primarily along Waller Creek. In 1928, as Jim Crow racism blossomed into institutionalized policies, Austin underwent a second round of urban development following the guidance of the Koch and Fowler 1928 Austin Master Plan. This strategy, by the way, took place in cities all over the United States. It's certainly not unique to Austin. A variety of urban development mechanisms, including zoning, parks creation, manipulation of municipal utilities, etc., were deployed to displace and concentrate people of non-European descent into East Austin, a dividing line inscribed by the construction of the Interstate I-35. Nevertheless, as historian Catherine Pace describes, a mixed-race edge zone persisted along Waller Creek and the adjacent Red River Street Cultural Residential District, which runs along the eastern edge of downtown, just west of the highway. In the 1970s and 80s, another wave of city beautification swept this community away under the creation of Waterloo Park, hardening I-35 as the racial line of division. Meanwhile, despite significant financial investment and primarily due to the ongoing flood risk, the downtown stretch of Waller Creek became neglected by most, making it a welcoming corridor for unhoused people and wildlife. Yet another round of Waller Creek beautification sprung up in the developer's paradise of the early 2000s, which is still going on today, resulting in acres of parks, trails, an amphitheater, and an epic underground tunnel to divert floodwaters, revitalize the creek, and attract investment. Simultaneously, Austin's Black and brown residents have undergone a second great displacement under the pressures of East Austin gentrification. So this is a lot of details and a lot of layers of history that I attempted to engage through this work. Through altered archival photos of Waller Creek, its floods, constructed monotypes, and installation with video projection, I invite contemplation and excavation of the intertwining histories of urban development and displacement, hoping to center the unruly subjecthood of the creek itself, while inviting closer looks and perspectives of others. Oops. Again, I'm just going to scroll through the work here. This one, Progress, true story. I worked at a coffee shop called Progress that was built in the gentrified section of East Austin, which was just appalling. I didn't last there very long, but I made that piece kind of in memory of that. This was a photo of a blanket that I took along the trail that had been left by someone who had slept there overnight. This little icon in the bottom corner of this is a picture of that epic tunnel with a truck in it underneath the creek. I'm obviously thinking a lot about the hydra of white supremacy that has played out in this history Austin, Texas, and across our country. And here's some in-process shots. I guess spread out over our entire school studio, which was great fun. Within the exhibitions, I also provide a reading table with this material so people can engage with the history and the work poetically, as well as really giving them access to the data and the research and the charts. In this iteration, the second iteration of the show, I also added an installation with video projection that I entitled Double Down. It's made of handmade broke mending tissue, cyanotyped with flood erosion retention netting, and fabric scrim and video projection. So I really attended to the materials of this project. The video projection is comprised of this gridded map being gently washed away with waves of the mending net cyanotype imagery. And my next project, the last project, Meandering River. This is an interdisciplinary project. Part of thinking about boundaries as being very porous is embedded in my practice of collaboration. So this is a recent interdisciplinary collaboration that took place on the University of Iowa campus. It was a participatory, embodied, and imaginative journey along the Iowa River and across time. The core co-directing team was composed of choreographer Stephanie Miracle, multimedia visual artist Liz McTurnan and myself, and scholar Eric Goodall and Jen Sup Montgomery. This team met weekly, usually walking along the river. Our desire was to illuminate the intricate ecological networks between humans, non-humans, water, and infrastructure along the Iowa River. Together we asked, how can we listen to the Iowa River and invite the community to listen along with us? We came up with a moving performance, meandering along the river's banks, accompanied by dancers and performative tour guides who led us through space and across time, pointing out attributes of the landscape from decades or eons, past, present, and future. Participants wore headphones in which they could hear the tour guides. Woven in between the text was a sonification piece. Live data taken from sensors across the whole watershed were collected and interpreted into human choral voices. When the nitrate levels were high, the voices were high, creating a harmonic and eerie dirge soundtrack and bringing our awareness to the whole length of the river. Meanderers were also provided with a meandering kit, a set of prompts and tools to continue their engagement and relationship with the river. Like my project with Waller Creek, a motivating question was, can we learn to engage the river as its own subjectivity, an active agent in our histories and communities, not just the scenery or backdrop of our stories, but living entities with opinions, desires, and lifeways all of their own? Can we develop relationships of mutuality and reciprocity with these rivers, along with the manifold, more than human community in which we live? And this was our little team of meanderers. And thank you very much. That's it for me. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
And now on to our last speaker, it's Andi Newberry.
All
Andi
right.
Newberry is a multimedia artist from North Texas who works in printmaking, painting, textiles, painting, drawing, and ceramics. Her work explores the fluctuation of memory, record keeping, and devotion in its many forms. Her art practice stems from making collages. The medium's sensibilities for composition and imagery remain the foundation of her approach. Newberry uses art to connect with others, primarily through numerous printmaking exchanges in which she has served as a participant and organizer. She finished her MFA in printmaking at the University of Colorado Boulder in December. Her current position is as a visiting assistant professor at Midwestern State University.
All right, thank you for that introduction, Izzy. All right, I'm gonna share my screen. Okay. Alrighty. So I won't do too much introduction, but my name is Andi Newberry. I'm very excited to have been invited to speak in this panel and be a part of this symposium organized by the students at IAIA. And to talk about like installation specifically. I haven't really given a talk like narrowing in on that specific topic, but it's something that I really enjoy. So I'm excited to talk about it. All right. So I approach installation um, in what really guides me is thinking about it as play on the wall. I think that was something that when I was first considering how to like break out of this idea of the rectangle, um, thinking about it as play really helped me. And I'm very inspired by a couple artists who I think kind of guide my thinking of installation are Judd Schiffman, who's a ceramicist, and his works. It's all these pieces and they become almost sticker-like on the wall. And then the other is Amy Bravo, who is a contemporary artist working in painting, drawing, sculpture, and the way that she really can create these worlds and also her DIY sensibility really inspire me. So thinking about playing on the wall, I also have an interest in creating things out of the quote unquote wrong material. I get a lot of excitement in that kind of play and trickery. But also like the idea of like convincing, like I'm not certain that I'm convincing anyone that my Dr. Pepper cans made out of paper are real. I'm not convincing anyone that these underwear of paper are actually underwear. But that kind of play and trickery and creating things out of something that they shouldn't be made out of, I'm really like excited by that, and I keep coming back to it. And then lastly, I think a lot about interactivity. And there's this kind of interesting kind of parallel, I think, between maybe not parallel, but a relationship between artist books and the way that artist books can control interactivity, and then the way that installation can kind of also control or kind of mold interactivity. So like Izzy said a little bit, so I won't get too much into it, but collage really is how I started regularly making art. I kept these, I called them art journals, but they're mostly collage. They'll have some drawing and writing, but for me, it's really about that quickness and direct way of working with collage and the kind of paradoxical freedom that I find in being limited, because working in collage, your choice of imagery is taken away by working with found images. So then it becomes about layering, spacing, how the images start to kind of inform one another. And by having some of that choice taken away, I kind of feel a lot more free in my decision making. So this is a regular practice that I still maintain, and it kind of influences my work in print and fabric work. So this piece, I think I like that Maeve kind of talked about, how you get from point A to point B. And I think this was a piece that, while I don't think of it as an installation, it kind of segued and leapfrogged me into thinking more about installation. So Don't Let the Door Hit You on the Way Out was thinking about the home I had left when I moved from Colorado, or moved to Colorado from Texas, which is where I had lived my whole life up until that point when I entered grad school. And it was a planned move, but it still felt like I was being kind of unceremoniously ejected from this space. And I was thinking about the memories and the people interactions that had gone in and out of these walls. So that's what led to this piece. And I got a lot of comments that it was verging on book-like because it had these flaps, it had pockets like where the sewing pins go into. So this led me to one, explore artist books further on paper and fabric, but it also the way that this shape just kind of activates space on the wall, I think really excited me. So this piece, Does Anyone Else Smell Smoke? Is a pretty large scale piece using monotype, screen monotype, and then there's paint. And viewers can open and close the microwave door. And if you've seen some of my other work, I have a piece where it's a screen print on paper and it's visiting this memory, which is where my younger brother did actually put a metal Batmobile toy in the microwave and it caught on fire. So there's a screen print that, depicts like the larger kitchen scene and then the microwave is the smaller part of it. And I was interested in what it would be like to kind of revisit the memory again in this larger format. And a lot of how I think about memory is I'm interested in how like cinema kind of shapes how we talk about or characterize our memory, like things like close-ups or moments being in slow motion. Those kind of, I think about that a lot. So with this large scale kind of close-up of the moment of action, the microwave on fire, me and my other siblings thinking we're playing firefighters, like coming to help rescue, but my parents have it under control, all of that kind of drama going into that. And one thing I talk about with my students when we work in installation is how do you maintain or do you want to maintain like the poetic thread of the piece? If you're encouraging interactivity, how are you using like museum or gallery text in a way to your advantage where you can kind of keep that environment? So that's what I was thinking about. There was like a small text that said, open to see what kind of trouble we'll be in, closed to keep smelling smoke. So that was how I tried to indicate to people, it's okay to touch, it's okay to open and close the microwave and kind of have that reveal of the Batmobile through the semi-opaque plastic that made up the door. Um, so, um, and also kind of letting people be a little bit in on the joke or in on the mischief and the troublemaking. And so that microwave piece became a part of my MFA thesis exhibition at the CU Art Museum, which was called Controlled Burn. But this laundry lines installation was sort of the backbone of that exhibit. And, my work was really thinking about, these charged home environments and not only like the playful kind of memories that we use to characterize how we grow up and who we are to other people. Like for me, that memory with the Batmobile on fire, it becomes a way for me to kind of tell people like a little bit of a window into like how I grew up. But not only those kind of mischievous moments, but also growing up in a Christian conservative environment and that kind of always feeling like I'm towing the line of hiding or being able to be vulnerable. So I was thinking about all of that and trying to think about the exhibit. And then also practically, I needed something that could help me bridge these gaps of the ways I was working with prints on paper versus fabric collages versus objects that are trying to be like other objects like the microwave. So this laundry line also became a way where I was so excited that I could kind of bridge those gaps and jump between those things. Like I could hang an actual print on the line, but I could also have these kind of fabric pieces and then the paper that's trying to look like fabric. And you'll see in this sketchbook, like it says, have it all. And I think that's something that kind of characterizes my work. And I was so excited, like in the corner, I said, wow, I can't wait to make this, even if I can only hang it in the art building. So the laundry poles are modeled off of like actual rusted, hefty laundry poles in my family's backyard. And it felt like every couple summers either the washer or dryer was breaking. And if the washer and dryer were broken at the same time, we would have outings to the laundromat. But if the washer was still working, then we would hang the laundry in the backyard, and that became part of our rituals, part of our chores. So thinking about those moments of like weaving in between the lines, and sweating back there, hanging up the clothes. But I made these out of screen print monotype, just printing big flat fields of color and texture, and then using those to kind of construct the poles. And I'm sewing the strips together, and they can, before I back them with chicken wire, they were just flat and they could fold and be very modular. So something important to me about working with, print and fabric is, transport. And I love that fabric especially can be like rolled up. But yeah, the way that this could fold, and then it got backed with chicken wire. So it's kind of semi playing between the 2D and the 3D. Um, the lines themselves are binding with scraps sewn into them. And I love leaving stray threads and scrappiness in all my pieces. So this was a piece that was on the line, made of monotype. And I'm also thinking about, being a girl in this kind of like playful, but not really, like kind of degradation of being a girl, like seeing those "I will trade sister for pizza and video games" t-shirts, which my mother would never let my brothers have, but I saw them all the time at school. And they're funny, but also not. Um, and then the days of the week underwear. And people could walk back and forth and kind of under the lines. The poles were about 6 feet tall. So when the lines draped, you kind of had to duck under them. But again, I was thinking about that feeling of being in the backyard and kind of swaying in the heat. So I wanted people to kind of have to interact with their bodies against the lines if they wanted to get back there. And something unexpected for me was also the play with shadows and the lines casted onto the walls. I thought that was very beautiful. Um, all right, and then I'll close out with a very recent project, which is like my behemoth Dr. Pepper pile. So this seed kind of started out when I was thinking back on the backyard, because we would collect cans, not just Dr. Pepper, but we would collect cans and they'd sit in bags in the yard for years. And then, every once in a while, we'd take a load out to the metal recycling plant at the edge of town. And in exchange for all our cans, we'd maybe get like $30 or something. And we'd, go to Sonic, I guess. But I was interested in that kind of, holding on to these things for so long, and then what do you really get out of it? And then making these in monotype, which is very painstaking, very slow. And thinking about the inefficiency of choosing to do it that way. I'm really interested in that kind of tension and humor and the futility of why are you doing it this way? Because I'm someone who's always like, oh, like beating myself up if I could have done something, more efficient and faster or better. And I think that can be a printmaking thing, but it's also just part of our world and how fast we're expected to be. So doing it in kind of like a comically like inefficient way was kind of fun for me, and frustrating. Like there are times where I was like, what am I doing with this? But so I think I made about 120 cans, including ghosts. So like the more I did it, the more I kind of sped up, and I did get a little bit more efficient doing them on a big sheet. Um, so the ghosts would become like they lose a lot of legibility, but I kind of started to really fall in love with them. And I was thinking about the like, the weathering that those cans were experiencing, being outside with the rain and the bugs and the leaves. So even these moments where, the text and clarity kind of gets lost, but it's just like that tone and texture, I started to really love those. So I had to scan all of these before they eventually ended up in this piece called Collecting, which was in a group show in Denver this spring. So this is another thing that if someone wants to hear, I can talk about it later, because I know earlier in the other panel they were asking about like practicality and transporting and instructions for installation. In this piece, I had agreed to be in this show in Denver before I knew I would be in this position here in Texas for the spring. So I ended up driving over a weekend with all the cans and I dropped them off. And then I spent one day in Denver and then I drove right back. But also the act of like driving in a car for 24 hours over like a 72-hour period with my plastic tub of Dr. Pepper cans made out of paper. Like it's so ridiculous, but I love it. I love that I did that. But I got to scope out the gallery before and I really wanted this brick wall and like the way that it lined up with the grit. I think it turned out really well, but this is also something I think this was kind of the first chance for me to iterate this and see what it looks like in a space. So I think there's definitely still more that can be done. And another thing is I couldn't be present for installation, but I told Emily Moyer, who curated the show, and Ray, who works at the gallery, I tried to guide them through like what I wanted. Like I knew I wanted it to be like a dense pile, but beyond that, I said that they could make decisions about arrangements, and they kind of chose to trail some of the like the lids alone off. So that like collaboration and maybe not even collaboration is kind of like I'm letting them impart onto how it's going to be arranged. I'm kind of interested in exploring that more in the future. And also like the fact of like making these prints and then when I'm assembling them and then crushing them, like that kind of destruction and play. And also like when I was making them and just to like toss them and kick them was so much fun. So I think doing even more with play and letting other people kind of impart or shape how the objects are presented, I'm kind of interested in doing that more in the future. But yeah, that's it. Thank you. I'll exit.
I wanted to just say thank you for all of your beautiful presentations and amazing installation work. I'm gonna just have a couple questions. My first one being, um, what's your process of creating a print from initial concept to the final rendition? Or at least, what is that process like for you in terms of reflecting on it now?
I can jump in. So the process of like beginning to sort of end with a print. Um, well, I think it kind of varies between like what area of print I know I need to work in. So sometimes there's an image and I'm like, okay, this needs to be like an 11 layer screen print and this needs to be a monotype. And that really shapes a lot, just by nature of the process. But I don't know, I think maybe it's something in there about, and it's like that's something I think I want to reflect on more is like, why does I think this image needs to be a screen print? Why does this need to be a fabric collage? And I think also sometimes it's what I need out of the work. Like, do I need to work more in an intuitive collage way of working, or do I need to feel like I'm doing something structured?
Yeah, I feel like that answer changes with each different project, I guess I would say. I'm really interested in collaborating with the artwork as well. So I'm really excited by processes and even a creative process where I'm not entirely in control and I'm responding to what's happening um, with the plate or with the materials. And I really love collaging as well. So a lot of times I'll make prints and then recombine those in various ways and create new relationships among the elements. So I think collage is a part of a number of people's here's practice. Um, yeah, and then I also have photographic based work, and some of that is most of that is like experimental photography that also happens through chance, through like multiple exposure kind of hand crank cameras that are really unpredictable, and then once the images come to me, it's a process of trying to figure out what kind of method of printing will best serve them. But, sometimes that's CMYK. A lot of times for me, it's CMYK with altered ink colors with metallics on like a matte film or something translucent. So it's activating the filmy light quality of the image. But it really varies.
Yeah, I think for me it varies as well. I kind of like to have maybe three or four things going at once. So that way, when I lose interest in something or don't want to physically do that thing, I move on to the next. But a lot of my projects, even before that, um, they, I think like they come up in conversations with my mother. Like we we actually talk almost every day, and sometimes she'll like send me videos of something, like the papaya tree that's growing at her house, or she'll be like, "Oh, I had to work today," or "Oh, I'm frying fish, and my boyfriend doesn't like," like these random blips that my brain just holds on to for some reason that I just make artwork about. Like it's very narrative of my life and my story, and kind of a rule that I have for myself is if I think about it more than four times, we have to figure out how to make it. Um, but that's where things come to me. And also fun, like this feels so silly, but when I'm driving, a lot of times when I'm driving or watching movies, like I just have these like ideas that come up. And so I'm in the habit of recording myself while I drive of these ideas, or keeping like a notepad with me. Because if I'm in a movie and I'm thinking about dried fish, like I'm not gonna be able to focus on the movie. So that's really how these ideas come to me.
Maeve, I've had times where I have to, like, at a red light, like, reach over and grab my notebook so I can jot something down while I'm at a quick stop. Um, and, it's probably not good. It's like texting while driving, but I get that about driving kind of stimulating or opening up something.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I'll have one friend and I text him. I'm like, Jacob, I'm having an art idea. Just ignore this text, but like I need to come back to it. And I'll tell, like Siri, I'm like, Siri, text Jacob. I have an art idea.
Maeve, I had a question for both of y'all, but for Maeve, like that first slide you showed where it was like the hanging piece and then the artist, like the accordion books.
Mhm.
I was so interested in how like those white spaces, like it makes you come to like a complete stop, and like by having that piece kind of in the middle and then the gap. And to me, it kind of really mirrored how in an artist book, like you can really control people's
Mhm.
pacing and people like when people have negative space and when they have to flip to another page to get information. It kind of did that, but in an installation. So I was wondering if um or maybe just how you think about like artist book forms, or I don't know if you have any thoughts on anything to do with like how you control pacing and how you can force people to like have a pause and have a stop potentially with the work.
Yeah, no, thanks for the question, Andy. Honestly, I think a lot of it is very intuitive, and like I think sometimes I think about my own personal cadence and how to incorporate that into artwork. But yeah, a lot of that was intentional. Like it was intentional to incorporate that like cadence or rhythm into that piece. And I honestly, I think of artist books as like portable installations or miniature installations is really the way I think about them. It wasn't mentioned in my intro, which is totally fine. I went to the University of Iowa Center for the Book for a year and got a certificate there. And I think that also really opened my eyes to what do we consider an artist book, and how does an artist book function? Where does that apostrophe even go in artist book if you think it belongs, in the in the title artist book. Um, but I think, yeah, for me, it's just more like a portable installation or an intimate installation is the best way to describe it. And I'm very much of the school of thought that it's an artist book if the artist decides it's an artist book. And I think there is some like research that can be done into that, or like when I teach the artist book class here, more what I'm concerned about is how students are bringing in their research or their knowledge of what an artist book is and informing me of why this artwork they made is in fact an artist book. So I hope
Mhm.
that answered your question.
Yep, that's great. And Heather, I really grabbed onto that piece memory worker with the tree and the projection kind of like slumping over it, kind of weaving in the branches. And then I had a small question, which is what is frottage? Like when you listed that as like a media or a technique. And then I also was curious about maybe hearing about your time at Flatbed. I know it's not necessarily
Oh
related to
yeah,
installation, but
yeah.
being back home in Texas this semester, I drove down to Print Austin back in February and, have been trying to just kind of reconnect and revitalize some of those Texas connections.
Mhm.
So I'm just curious to hear like what that time at Flatbed was like for you and maybe that collaborative experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll get to that in a second. Frottage was a method of making a rubbing, and what I did on those two prints, they were made out of like Gumpy, or they were very thin paper, and I think I actually used one of those old-fashioned label makers that you like cha-chunk cha-chunk to make a raised text, and I put it behind the paper, and then I used sandpaper and rubbed off the surface so it actually like kind of sanded out the text in those two pieces. So that's what those that's what I did for those pieces. But I think frottage is also maybe the same method that people use for doing like gravestone rubbings, or it's a method of like kind of rubbing from the texture from the back. Melanie's nodding her head, so I'm on the right track with that. That's good. My time at Flatbed was incredibly formative. I didn't get an undergrad degree in art. I studied kinesiology, and I realized after I got my undergrad that the only thing I could think of that would keep my attention for any amount of time was making artwork. So I'm like, well, I've got to start at square one. So I kind of like started with community classes, and then I started with sculpture. I really loved it. I felt like using working with clay felt like I was speaking my native language for the first time. So um, I started as a sculptor. I don't mean to go so far back, but it was through community college that I got introduced to printmaking, and I just kind of like embraced it as one of my like in my polyamorous like material kind of practice. I the first print I pulled was like, I'm gonna be doing this the rest of my life. It was, it was like marriage at first sight, not just love at first sight. I was totally hooked. And so my teacher at the community college had worked at Flatbed, and that's how I had learned about Flatbed. And then also interestingly, like my parents and Kathy Brimberry knew each other. So I knew of Catherine in the community, and then I went on this 6 month trip around the world, and when I got back, I didn't have a job, and I went to an artist talk at a home, and it was very crowded, and the only seat left in the whole house was like sharing this little cozy love seat with Catherine Brimberry, and I sat down next to her, and I was like, I just went on this trip around the world, and I looked for print shops wherever I went. And anyways, she's like, well, we need an assistant right now. So that was how it was like very serendipitous that I got connected. And then it felt like a real, like, it was like grad school part one, where, just working there a few years and just having artists come in and getting to have that intimate experience with how they like working through their process. And some of them were experienced printmakers, but a number of them weren't. They worked in other media, and what Catherine would do when she brought them in was just like really blow their minds with how you can think differently, like what thinking like a printmaker does to expand your art practice. And she was really a magician, and or a alchemist there with bringing people's practices and bringing it into the medium of printmaking, whatever that happened to be. And something that really excited me watching her do that, or being with her doing that, was she had been in it for decades at that point and was still like inventing new methods to kind of, to realize visions for different artists. She would recombining it. I think that was something that was really exciting for me about printmaking, is just this like endless possibilities of that. I also really like was humbled and valued when the artists would be in the studio and be like, we would try a few things and we'd look at these things on the wall and they'd be like, what do you think? And I, like even my first day there, Catherine was in a collaboration and the artist, looked at me, was like, well, which color do you think? And I was like, I have an opinion here. Like, I really think that one. And it was like a really safe and welcoming place for me to get to like exercise my voice and to start, yeah, just developing that sense of collaboration. Obviously, I mean, if you're familiar with my practice at all, like I collaborate incessantly almost. I'm very motivated by that kind of team element and the like sparkiness that happens in the conversation. Um, so, that was definitely like activated and reinforced through my time at Flatbed. Um, yeah, I had the opportunity to be on the other end of the equation after like actually printing the Waller Creek project. After grad school, I was talking to Catherine. That was a project that was many years in my imagination and my thinking about how to, in my awareness and just processing and trying to figure out how to make a show or make artwork about this dynamic that I was really aware of and very troubled by in my city. And Catherine was like, we want to support this, So I did the first round of prints in kind of a space in South Bend, Indiana, Segura Studios, in a weekend workshop. Wasn't very satisfied with what came out of that, and then a few years later, I went to Flatbed and did a residency there and worked with one of their printers and further developed the work. And then Catherine showed, the first show that I had was at Flatbed. So it's been this very long relationship. Catherine's like my print mom for sure, and her husband Mike, they're like almost like second parents to me. So yeah, they are wonderful people, and Catherine has like a really special legacy, I think. And has like, I mean, sorry you opened a can of worms here, but just the one last thing I'll say about her is that she really has an ethos of generosity. I think that was something that also really moved me, and made me love working there with her. It was like everything that she had, she was ready to give it away. She was really known to be, there was like the opposite of gatekeeping around any techniques or, anything like that. She was just incredibly generous and very excited to, to open the doors and bring people in. So yeah, I hope that answers your question. I'm happy to talk more about it if you have more
Thank you.
questions.
Yeah, I'm glad it
Yeah.
was such a positive experience. It sounds really cool. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Melanie?
Oh, I just, can you hear me?
Mhm.
Oh, I just wanted to say how beautiful each presentation led into the next one, and it's wonderful to spend this evening seeing each of you. I've already made an appointment with Maeve to hear the videos, and Heather, just how you're doing the research about the communities and how it's happened across this country. And I do that with when I'm doing map projects. So I love that aspect. And Andy, oh my gosh, your play and the way that you're making those cans and just what you do. What a beautiful group of presentations this evening. My husband Clark is sitting over here listening, and I said to him, "Don't watch Downton Abbey tonight. Let's watch these guys." And he said, "I'm listening." So thank you
Thanks.
for beautiful presentations, all of you.
Thank you. Yeah. Likewise to my co-presenters, I was very interested to see some of the through lines and connect points of connection between all of our work. So yeah,
We
very
had two
interesting.
laundry lines tonight. That's pretty
Yeah.
cool.
hmm
It's like it was
And my
intentional.
big paper installations also fold up really flat and small, and basically like the size of the projector is the biggest thing, in that work as well.
I think we have time for maybe like one to two more questions, depending on how long the answer is. But I see there's one from one of Kat and Andy's students, Minerva.
Hi. So I had a question. I was really interested in how everyone had such like amazing installation, just how amazing each installation looked and how different it looked within itself. And Andy, I really liked what you said about breaking out of the rectangle. And so I kind of, well, I guess I can just ask one. Um, I was going to ask what advice you would give to artists, because I know for me specifically, I get really stuck in that rectangle. So how would you ask like artists to break away from that or explore different processes?
I think for me, one of the things that led me out of the rectangle a little bit was just when I started to want to print on fabric, and and that was when I was, finishing up undergrad here at MSU, my alma mater, and Kat was, advising me, and I'm like, what are the rules? Like, what can I do when I want to start printing on fabric? And, she told me, like, look at Faith Ringgold, look at Robert Rauschenberg, but really the answer is like, there aren't really rules. So starting to figure out working with that, but just for me personally, like, once I started to play with textiles and connecting back to like, all the women in my family like sew or make quilts. And I hadn't really thought about that as a through line until I started printing on fabric. And then, that kind of went off on its own thing. So for me, that kind of happened out of that.
I think it's good advice about fabric, and partly because it's a different kind of material that moves, it moves differently. It's maybe a little bit less precious or expensive than paper, or finding a way to get um to feel not precious about what you're making, and then like tearing things, recombining them, collaging is a really nice way to do that. Yeah. And yeah, I don't know. I've got lots and lots of ideas for how to break out of, origami, do origami stuff. Um, Lots of different ways to break out of the rectangle.
Yeah, I think not to echo too much of what has already been said, I think that's what's so great about printmaking, right? Is for the most part, you can just keep making more. And so I try, like with my students, I try to encourage them to get to a point where, yeah, it isn't so precious. It's like, oh, look, you have so many. Like my current assignment, we're making an addition of 50 minimum. Granted, it's not with a risograph, but like, I'm like, okay, you have 50 of these. Now what can you do to transform them? Because you have so many and you can make more. And a lot of my students are making over 300 prints and just like cutting them apart, putting them together, hanging them up, printing on them. Um, and so, yeah, I think that's a very print specific answer, but I think also another way to try and break out of the rectangle is to work within the rectangle at first, right? So a lot of these bolts of fabric come in rectangles or sheets of paper come in rectangles. And once you build enough of your substrate or have enough of that, I think then you can really physically conceptualize that it doesn't have to be as precious or as like it's not like you only have one or two to do something with. When you see like, oh, that's what 100 sheets of paper look like. I'm like, okay, now tear it down so that you have four for every sheet, right? So that's my best advice is to try and physically see how much you have first. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Is there, I think maybe like one more question. Minerva, did you have a second one? Because I think I don't want to cut you off, but
I did. It was
okay.
more, I forgot. I'll be
Okay, it's
honest.
fine.
I
It's
forgot.
fine. It's fine. Is
If
there
I think
any?
of it, I'll just ask Andy later and I'll be like, can you pass this on to everyone else, please?
That's totally fine.
Oh my God. I just want to say thank you again. And oh my gosh, addition of 100. Alana, your students are doing 500. Let's go there.
Well,
All have fun.
it was funny because it was actually based off the last panel talk we had earlier today. I was talking to my colleague who were teaching that class next semester, and I was like, Acadia said that she had to print or do 1,000 of these leaves to like fulfill her installation, and it wasn't even enough. So we were like 500 minimum.
Love it. Let's go there.
Yep,
Okay.
that's great.
Well, thank you guys so much. Ezzy, do you have any other final thoughts or questions? I want to cut you off. Okay. Well, thank you all so much for spending the day with us, and thank the three of you for ending us off so strong and doing this so late at night, especially for our dear Heather and Andy, who are, I think, an hour later. And I hope that both of you, I mean, Andy, I think you were teaching all day, and Heather, I think you were too. But it's great. Thank you guys so, so much.
Thank you for putting this together. This was an amazing day.
Yeah,
This is
thank you,
so,
Alana.
so great. Thank you,
Thank
Alana,
you.
and thank you
Thank you,
all
my
the students at
students.
the Institute for inviting us. You guys are the best, and I wish I could just drive down there and go eat green chili with you guys right now.